Hello everyone and welcome to Learn Angular 2.0 step by step in 8 hours. So in 8 hours we will try to understand how to use Angular 2.0 and also we will be creating a small mini project. So the first 30-40 minutes would be a beginner's tutorials where we'll try to understand the major components of Angular, and then we will slowly start a project and try to see that how Angular 2.0 helps us to do projects in a more better way, right? So if you want to get anything about Angular, you can go to this site here, angularjs.org, and you can see that over here there are two download links. One is the old Angular, that is 1.x. So when I say 1.x means like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. So this complete old Angular is here, right? And the new one is Angular 2.0, which has been recently launched. Now, one of the questions which keeps coming to us is that, sir, should we do the old Angular or not? Then my suggestion is, please do it, because if you see here, the Angular 1.x was released in October 2010. So today it is 2016. So this 5 or 6 years, lot of projects have been using Angular 1.x. So yes, industry will have a lot of maintenance projects still using 1.x. So I would suggest that yes, do go and watch our Angular 1.x videos which are here. So you can see that we have like around 20 videos on Angular 1.x which goes in depth. And again, this Angular 1.x videos are like Learn Angular 1.x in 8 hours. So these are again 8-hour series here, right? So I would suggest yes, you should go and do it, because Angular 2.0, if you see, has been released 11 days back. So like on this video date, whatever you are seeing, it is like just 11 days. So definitely industry will take a bit time, to digest it, right? So I would say yes, do 1.x, but yes, also learn 2.0 so that you are updated with the new things. So in order to do Angular 2.0, let us click on this link over here. If you click on this link, what the Angular team has done, they have created a separate website here called as angular.io. I hope that this IO means input output. I hope, okay? So there is a separate website here called as angular.io, and it says that one framework for mobile and desktop. Okay, and there is a get started link here, and if you click on this get started link, it gives you that how you can go and build your first Angular app. So actually they have given 7 steps out here, and if you follow them, you can build your first Angular application. Now if you walk through these 7 steps, right, as you go walking down below, you will see that there are lots of new things in this, like Node, and if you go down below, there are some JSON files like package.json, tsconfig, there is something called a system.js. And if you go and scroll down below, as you scroll down below, you see some syntaxes like import, export, class, right? And if you go down below, you will find there are some other JS file, which Angular is using, like shim, zone, reflect, system.js, and so on. So one of the things, what I have felt is, when you're doing Angular 2.0, you need to understand 6 things prior to it. You need to understand these 6 things. You need to understand what is Node, what is TypeScript, what are shims, polyfills, core.js, what is zone.js, and what is reflect metadata. Because when I look at the Angular tutorial, right, which is given out here, it is using a lot of other open source frameworks. So what I found is that if you go and first understand these 6 concepts, that is Node, TypeScripts, core.js, zone.js, reflect metadata, and system.js. So with this, your life would be really, really easy when you are doing your first application of Angular. So what my suggestion is, as a prerequisite, please go ahead and first watch these videos in the following series. First watch the Node.js video, then watch TypeScript, then watch shims, then watch zone, and then metadata. So with that, it will help you to understand this tutorial in a very easy way. Now definitely these videos are only accessible to the paid members, so people who subscribe to questponvideo.com only they get access to it. But here is a small gift from me, for people who are watching this video on YouTube. If you go and share this video out on your Twitter account or on your LinkedIn account or on your Facebook account, share this video out and send me the shared link at questpond@questpond.com. I will give you access to all of these 6 videos so that can make your Angular 2.0 learning in a very smooth way, right? So go ahead, share it, and I will give you the access to all of these 6 videos. Now for these Angular 2.0 lessons, or for the quick start and as well as the further lessons, I'll be using Visual Studio. So I'll be using Visual Studio 2015. So what I would suggest is go to visualstudio.com and download the Visual Studio IDE, which is over here, right? And also, because we're going to go and use TypeScript as well, okay, so please go and download the TypeScript for Visual Studio 2015 and install this setup. So basically you need 2 things. One is you need the Visual Studio 2015 setup, and also you need TypeScript, for Visual Studio 2015. Again, in this video, I'm not explaining what is TypeScript because we have a separate video on TypeScript. I would suggest to go and watch those prerequisite videos. So in that video, I have a TypeScript video which is of 45 minutes, which explains what is TypeScript. So over here, I will not be going into details of TypeScript at this moment. So I will be using Visual Studio 2015. So I would suggest please install 2015 and please install TypeScript for Visual Studio 2015. So let us go ahead and let us open Visual Studio and let us click on this new project over here and let us create a web application project. So I'll click on this ASP.NET web application and I will name it as Lab 1, right? So Lab 1 Angular 2.0, right? So this is the first lab of Angular 2.0, and let me press OK. And let me select at this moment just the empty ASP.NET the template, because at this moment I don't want to get into MVC and WebAPI and web forms. I would suggest that in case you want to do MVC, WebAPI, we have separate tutorial series for MVC and WebAPI, right? So in case if you think that you want to do MVC, you want to do all the other things, then you can see that we have Learn MVC, we have WebAPI, and so on. So there are other series for the other parts, but in this tutorial my main goal is to teach you Angular 2.0. So let us make it as empty so that we can concentrate on only Angular 2.0, right? And let me press OK. Now before I start with the tutorials, before I start following the steps given in the quick start, let me quickly define why do we need Angular? What is the main goal of Angular? So the main goal of Angular is that Angular is a binding framework. It binds your JavaScript object with the user interfaces. Now if you see in projects, what happens is you have JavaScript classes like, let's say, customer, supplier, and you tie up with customer.html, you tie up with supplier.html. So over there, you would be writing a lot of code, which transfers the data from the UI to the object and from object to the UI. So basically you write a lot of binding code. What Angular promises you that this binding code I will take care of. You don't need to write this. So in short, let us say, so let me go and create quickly a UI. So let me add a folder here. So I'm going to add a folder here. I'll say in this folder my user interfaces are there. Let me add one more folder here where we will add our business objects, or I'll say model, right? Business objects, whatever name you want to give, right? Depends. People have different naming conventions for business classes, business logic, so whatever naming convention you follow. So let us say I have a UI here. So let us say I have a UI which is a very, very simple HTML page, and which is, let us say, customer.html. Okay, and in this customer.html I have some text boxes like username, customer name, customer code, customer amount. So let us say that in this I have some user controls like customer name. So let us say over here I have some HTML controls like, so let us say I have a text box which takes in the customer name, right? In the same way, I have some text box which takes the customer code, right, and a customer amount. So customer code and customer amount, right? So what I want is, I want that this user interface, I want to go and bind it with the object. So let us say that, you know, in the model you have a nice TypeScript file here called as, let us say, customer.ts. okay, so TypeScript. Now in case, you know, if you have not done the prerequisite and you do not know what is a TypeScript, give me 30 seconds, let me explain you what is TypeScript. So TypeScript is nothing but it is a superset language which is built on the top of JavaScript. Now if you see a lot of developers out there, you know, they come from object-oriented programming background, you know, so if you tell them that you want to write a class, you know, then they have such kind of a class keyword, right? So they write class and then they write customer like this, right? Now in JavaScript, you know, we do not have these class keyword interfaces, inheritance, you know, there is a different set of syntaxes for it. And people who come from object-oriented programming background like C# and Java, it becomes very difficult for them to understand those syntaxes. So what TypeScript does, you know, you go and you write in TypeScript and he will compile to the respective JavaScript. For example, over here you can see now I have created a class, and if I go and build this, what TypeScript will do, it will go and it will take this customer.ts and it will generate a customer.js file for you. So if you go and see your Solution Explorer, right out here, you will see that there is a customer.js file which is generated, right? And if you click on this customer.js file, it is nothing but internally it is JavaScript code, right? So definitely, you know, one of the things, you know, which I will be using in this tutorial is TypeScript, because if you go to the site of Angular, you know, where they have displayed their quick start, you can see that, you know, Angular can be done by using TypeScript. It can be done by using pure JavaScript also. It can done by using Dart as well. But TypeScript is their preferred way of doing it. And the complete Angular is built on TypeScript, right? So TypeScript was used to create Angular framework. So definitely, you know, if TypeScript was used to create Angular framework, then it makes sense to write our components using TypeScript, right? And in case if you're new to TypeScript, again I repeat that please do go ahead and see this 45 minutes video of TypeScript so that you can understand the syntaxes of TypeScript in a better way, right? But for now, what I will do is, so I have this customer class, and let me create 3 properties over here. So one property is so we have 3 text boxes, right? Customer name, customer code, and amount. So I'll say, okay, so one is, I will need the customer name, so customer name : string data type, right? The second is I would need the customer code and again the string data type, and then I will need the customer amount, which is actually a number, right? So 0, right? So now what our goal is to bind this object with this user interface. So we want to bind these user interface inputs with this class over here. So we want to bind this model with this UI, and that's where exactly Angular 2.0 will help you out. Angular 2.0 is a binding framework. It binds JavaScript objects with HTML user interface. So now let us go to the Angular quick start tutorials. So let us go to step 1. So step 1, it says that create and configure your project, right? So to create and configure the project, what it has done is, you know, it has a couple of configuration files here. You can see that there is package.json, there is tsconfig.json, there is typings.json, and there is a config.js file, right? So let us go ahead and put all of these files into this folders over here. I will go through each one of these files later on, but let us first start copying the code from here and creating the JSON file and doing things, right? So let us first start with package.json. So I'm going to go into my project here and I will add a new item. I will say config here. Remember, in 2015 we have a lot of support for Node, you know, TypeScript and so on. So I'm going to go and add the package.json from here, and I will just copy this code. I will paste it here, right? Later on, we are going to go and do a lot of tailoring. Okay, so don't worry on that. Second, let us add tsconfig.json. So let me add a JSON file, tsconfig.json. There it is. This tsconfig.json is for TypeScript, so configuration of TypeScript. So copy code, put things over here. Again, typings.json is a file which belongs for TypeScript configuration. So let us go ahead and say this is the name was typings.json, right? So typings, right? Control V, and system.js file, system.js.config.js. So system.js, so add a new JS file, system.js.config.js. So system.js.config.js, and let us put this configuration of this JS file over here, right? So there it is. You can see now we have all the necessary configuration files over here, right? Now let me go through each one of them. Okay, the first very important file is the package.json. This package.json has all the necessary JavaScript frameworks which you need in Angular 2.0, which needs to be copied into your project, right? So it has all that necessary things over here, and in order to go and get all of these things into your project, into this lab 1, we need to go and use Node, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, I'm going to go and open this folder. I will copy this address as text. Now remember that Node automatically does go and get things, but I would suggest that still use npm rather than using Visual Studio. Means, in other words, in Visual Studio, if I do a save here, what it does is it actually goes and starts building internally, right? But I would suggest do not do that, because there are some issues with Visual Studio 2015 about doing automatic firing automatic node command from Visual Studio. So I'm going to go and close this at this moment. I will save this. So what I will do is I will use Node manually for now. So I'm going to go and copy this, and I will go to Node, and I will do a npm install into that folder, right? So there are some issues with the automatic package.json, so let me avoid that for now. So I will go here and I will say npm install, right? What this npm install does, this npm install will go into this folder. He will look into package.json and he will get all the necessary JavaScript file which is needed for Angular 2.0, right? So you can see that I have done a npm install on this folder, and inside this folder only the package.json is there. So the npm command will look into package.json and start getting all the necessary files into your project. So let us wait for 1 or 2 minutes and let us see that the npm starts getting things. You can see now npm has already started things over here. So there you can see that the npm has installed all the files, or I'll say it has downloaded all the necessary JS files for Angular 2.0. And also very quickly I would like to point out here, you can see that it is saying typings. So remember that this npm has not only used package.json to download the files, but also it has taken some settings from typings.json as well to fix things, right? So basically it uses both typings as well as package to get all the things for Angular, right? And all of these JS files at this moment are present into the node_modules folder. So inside this you can see all the files have been downloaded, right? So what I've done is, when I did an npm, I just closed Visual Studio because of a small defect, but now I can again go and open Visual Studio and open my project. So let me do that. And when I do it, what I will also do is I'm going to go and remove, or I'll say, okay, I did not ever include the project actually, but in case I have included it, I would actually go and exclude the package.json file, right? So the package.json file and typings.json file, I won't be including in the solution at this moment because of a small issue with Visual Studio 2015 which I'm facing, and any kind of JS file which I want, I will modify the npm, the package JSON, and do a npm, right? So what I will do is I will exclude the package JSON from the project. I will exclude the typings.json from the project because I think whatever was needed has already been taken inside the project, right? So we have all the necessary node underscore modules folder over here, which has all the components. Now, one very, very important thing, never ever go and right click and include this in your project. Remember, never do that. Never do that because there are some issues with the compiling of 2015, right? So do not try to do a include. You will be under a big problem later on. Okay. Right. Good. So we are all set. So we have our models folder. We have our UI folder, which has the UI. We have all our node underscore modules folder, wherein we have all the necessary JS files, and we are all ready to start writing the code of binding. So now let me go and create a very separate folder here called as binding, right? So in this binding folder, all that binding code between the user interface and the JavaScript file will be there, right? So all the binding code of Angular will actually go inside this binding folder. Remember, when you are working with Angular projects, it is very important to have a nice folder structure, or else, after some time you can just, just get confused, right? So I'm going to go and create a folder called as binder. If you wish, you can name this folder as view model because they connect the view and the model. Some people term this folder as controller, welcome. Some people term this folder as presenter. So whatever synonyms you can think about, I like this word binder because it binds my model and my UI, right? So all my binding code will go into this folder. In Angular, the most important thing which binds the UI and the JavaScript object is the component. The component is the heart of binding the UI and the JavaScript object in Angular 2.0. So let us go ahead and create a component. So what I will do is I will say, okay, here is my customer model, which wants to get binded with a customer HTML, and it will go via the customer component. So when I say customer component, I mean to say it is the Angular component. So this customer component will actually bind, or which will be the middle layer, which will sit between the customer and customer HTML to do the binding. So the customer component will be the binder, to bind the customer class with the customer HTML, right? So let us go ahead and create our component in this file here. A component at the end of the day is nothing but a class, or I'll say a JavaScript function, which will have some code which will bind the model and the HTML, right? So let me go and create a class here called as customer component. So this class will have that binding logic to do the binding, right? But now remember that this is just a simple TypeScript class. If you want to go and really make a component, an Angular component which does the actual binding, we need something from Angular. So I'm going to say, okay, from Angular, let us go ahead and import the component. So I'm going to go and import the component. So from the Angular, from the core, I want to go and import this component. So over here, if you see in the node underscore modules, we have the Angular folder, and inside the Angular folder in the core, we have the necessary code for the component. So these all things actually help us to create a component, right? So you can see I've gone to @Angular. From the core, I'm importing the necessary things, which will help me to make a component. Now, remember that this customer component will take the model, that means the customer model, and throw it to the UI, right? Or bind it to the UI. So we need to go and import the customer. When I say the customer, means this customer over here, this customer.ts, which is in the model folder inside the customer thing, right? So I will say that, okay, export this customer class, so that I can consume it inside the component, and the component can then throw it in the UI, right? So I'll say here, okay, let us import the customer from the model folder and from the customer.ts or the customer.js. So there it is, right? So from here, this component will give out the customer object to the UI. So I'll say new customer, right? So you can see now the customer component is aggregating the customer model, and this person will then get sticked to this UI, right? So remember, model is this model is consumed inside the component, or I'll say exposed from the component, and will get attached to this UI. So remember, it's kind of a 3-layer. One is the model, one is the UI, and the other one is the binding, the component, which actually does all the work for you. You can also visualize this customer component as a view model. So basically, this view model, this binder, this presenter, this controller, actually we'll talk with a lot of models, like must be customer, must be addresses, must be utility objects. So he will actually take a lot of things from your library and then stick this whole UI logic. You can think about this like a UI binder logic, which will get stick to HTML, right? So what I will do is, let me go and create a kind of a master page. A master page is nothing but a page, which defines a uniform look and feel for your website. So if you look at your website normally has a left menu, a right menu, a footer, and a header. So I will go and create this master page here. So inside this master page, I will have my menus, my top menu, my left menu, whatever, right? So my logos and etc. Everything will be stuck here somewhere. And I would like to go and display my customer UI somewhere here. So you can see that what I've done is, in my master page, right, I've defined a placeholder. I've defined an area where I wish to go and load this customer component, right? And because now this is a master page, then my customer HTML should have only this much part of the code, because I cannot repeat the HTML tag again, right? I can have problems. So you can see here what I've done is that customer.html now becomes like a user control. It's like a user control, and this user control will get loaded into this placeholder and using the data from this component, right? So again, I'm repeating, this is my master page. Inside this master page, I'm going to go and load this user interface. This user interface gets the data from this binder or this component, and this component internally talks with the customer model, right? Great. So we have defined, how the component will talk with the model, but we have still not defined how this component will get loaded into this customer UI, right? So for that, we need to go and use attributes. We need to use something called as decorators, or you can say metadata, right? So I will go here and I will start decorating this class customer component. I will say here, okay, so component, and over here I will say, I want to load this customer component, or I want to select this customer component into that customer UI placeholder, right? So it will get loaded over here, right? And also I would like to go and define that inside this placeholder, what will be loaded. So I want to load, so comma, I want to load template URL. I want to load customer.html, right? So look at this. This is the class and this is the decorator on the top of the class. So a decorator is nothing but it is an attribute. If you remember in C# and Java, you can write a class like, let us say class customer, and then on the top of it you can go and decorate, saying obsolete. You can decorate things, right? So this decorator here defines how this customer component will get binded with the master page, and inside this master page then we go and we load this necessary user interface, right? So this is how the whole thing is now working. The next entity which is very important in Angular 2.0 is the module. You can think about module as collection of components. So at this moment, to keep it simple, I will talk about modules more later on, but for now just assume that a module takes in a lot of components and groups them logically, right? It's like a namespace what you have in a C#. Okay, so I'm going to go and add a component. Now remember that all of these things help you to do binding, right? So I'm actually going and adding them into the binder folder. So I'm going to go and add a module. A module also is a class at the end of the day, right? It is a JavaScript file. So I'm going to go and create a file here. I will say this is a customer module library. So module, right? And in this module, what we do is, so I'm going to go and create a module here called as customer module, right? Library. Okay. So my component name is what? My component name is customer component. So I will say please load the customer component from the binder folder, right? So from the binder, and because both of them are in the same directory, I don't have to do that, right? I can probably just say, just go and load the customer component, right? In case they were in different folders, then I had problems, but I should be able to load them straightforward. Oh, remember again, if you want to import it, you have to export it. If you don't export it, they will not get imported. So there it is, right? So you can see now I've defined a module, and again we have a decorator on the top of it which says that, okay, so what are the modules you have? Declaration. So I can have what all components you have in this modules. So I have the customer component, I can have the supplier component, and which is the startup component, the component which has to be bootstrapped. So I'll say at this moment, it is the customer. So there is only one component which is there as in the declarations, and one component in the bootstrap. In case you have multiple components, then you would have had multiple declarations, right? And you can also see there is something called as a browser module here. This browser module says that this library will be loaded, inside the browser. Okay. So basically this browser module is for the same. Great. So you have a component. The component has the modules. The modules define via the decorator, where this model should be stuck to, and the model, the UI, where it is, where the component will bind is loaded inside a master page. So now if you see the hierarchy is quite complex. So we have a module. The module has components. The components is referring a lot of models. If you say now you want to go and load this complete hierarchy of objects, then it is very difficult, right? So what Angular 2.0 has given, they have given something called as the startup file. So inside the startup file, you can just go and say, okay, load this module, and it will automatically go and load all the components and the model automatically internally, right? So I'm going to go and create a file here called as startup. So I will go and create a TypeScript file called as startup.ts. And inside this startup.ts, I will say, please go and load my module. That means my customer module. Okay, so please go and load my customer module. And when you load this customer module, ensure that you load all the other things. And again, you can see now, if you're saying you're going to say import, then don't forget to write here export. So I will return export. Oh, it's all there. Why it is showing an error? I'm in the same folder, right? Oh, not customer model, it's customer module, right? I'm sick. Remember, it should be the file name. Okay, this is customer module and here is customer module library.ts. So basically it has to be this name. It has to be the customer module library name, right? So this name, customer module library. Okay, so it has to be this file name what I have here. Okay, so yeah, there it is. Okay, so remember I had typed wrong thing over there, customer module library. So customer module, so this startup.ts file will load customer module library. Customer module library will load up customer component. Customer component will load all of its models, and these models will get sticked to the UI by using this decorator, and all this UI will get loaded inside this master page. Great, right? Isn't it? Now in this master page, we need to go and define certain script files. So you can see here on the quick start, they are given some certain script files, they're given certain things. So let me go and copy this and let me explain you what these scripts file do. So I'm going to go and copy the script file at the top. So already the Angular team has put some comments over there. But quickly, as I've said previously also, that if you go through the prerequisite videos, you will come to know what is shim.js, what is zone.js, what is reflect.js, what is system.js. So I will not go into that thing now, right? So I've, these JS files are needed, to run your Angular 2.0 project. For example, let me just quickly talk about each one of these JS files, what they do. This system.js, actually goes and loads your module, your components. So they go and actually do on-demand loading, right? The reflect.js, they help you to define attributes. So these attributes which you are defining over here are, or I'll say, the attributes what you are defined in your components are because of this reflect.js. The zone.js is specifically for async programming in JavaScript, where you want to make them treat the async code as one context. And shim.js is basically you want to ensure that in your old browsers, the new JavaScript code like ES5 and ES6 should work. So basically these files are for ensuring that your Angular can run in all the situations. So what I would suggest again to go and watch those 6 videos, wherein I have covered these 4 things as well, right? But at this moment, the most important part of the code is this. This code says that go and load the app, right? So what is this app? This app is nothing but, it is nothing but inside this system.js config file, they have defined something called as an app. So if you go and see over here, so actually this should be system.js.js, right? It's not just config, so .js. So if you see this, what happened? Oh gosh. So now there is the system.js config.cs file, what I have here, right? So this system config.cs file has the app. So basically I can make this name as startup, right? So from here in this config file, we define all the startup what we need. We need the core, we need the router, we need all the JS files, right? So basically I've defined here as the name as startup. So must be I can give the name in the master page as startup. Okay. Now remember that I have changed my folder structure a lot. If you see the what you call the Angular tutorial, what is available in the quick start, they have a very different folder structure, so they have defined a folder structure which is a bit different as compared to mine, so my folder structure is not like this. So definitely I need to make a lot of changes, but personally I like this folder structure, wherein I have my user interface in a different folder, I have my models in a different folder, I have my binders in a different folder, and must be my config files and startup files can also go in a different folder, right? So I do like to have that liberty of creating my own folder structure rather than following something which is coming from online, right? So because of this, what has happened is, now if you see this is my master.html. So the master.html is in the UI folder, while the nodes module is in the outside folder, right? So I need to go and do a lot of changes now to the paths here. So over here I will say // so let's see // yeah. So I will go top dot, so that, all right. So with this I need to just go and ensure that my paths are proper, right? So now I'm saying over here, from this master page, go one level top and then go one level bottom to the node modules, right? And my system.js again is in the top folder, so I need to go here again and say /. So that is where my system.js is, right? Good. And again in the system.js.config file here, if you see in the startup, right, in the startup they are saying main.js, but mine is not main.js, mine is startup.js. So again I need to go and change this. So remember that I've taken the liberty to go and change a lot of things. So depending on your project, you know, must be you would like to go and change these things, right? Again you can see here the npm folder will not be modules because this is in the outside folder. Must be okay. Let me keep it like this. I don't know if this will be an error or not, right? So let me now make this master page as startup and let us see that if our project will run or not. I'm sure that there are going to be problems because I have changed so many paths out there, but I think, you know, because I did these changes, you know, we come to know where is what, right? So basically now what will happen, the system.js will call startup, the startup will go here into the config.js and he will start loading all the files, and then he goes and looks into the startup.js or startup.ts, and from here he loads all my modules, my components and my models, right? So I have set this master page as a startup, and let us do a control F5. Let us see how it looks like. Control F5 I have done. So you can see now there our UI is running, so everything looks good, but nothing will happen because we have not defined our binding, right? So let us go and start defining the binding. So I would like to now go and bind. So remember now the way it is, from the customer component I'm exposing out customer obj, right? So let me go here to my customer HTML. So I would like to say here, bind this customer name with ng model. ng model helps you to bind to a property, right? So I will say, okay, this is the customer name, so bind it with so remember in the customer component, in the customer obj we have customer name, so I will say bind this UI over here with customer obj dot customer name, right? So ng model actually helps you to define binding on the property level, this with customer code, this with customer amount. So ng model helps you to define the binding at the property level, right? And if you want to go and display this, you know, you can always go and display this data on the UI. So you can say here, so whatever is in the object, please display it onto the UI here. So these curly brackets over here are termed as expressions. So I would like to go and display first the customer code, right? Here I would like to display the customer amount, right? Great. So now let us go and refresh this page. Let us see how it looks like. So I'll do F12. So I'm going to go and reload this page. Let us see what happens. And you can see that as I'm reloading the page, you can see down below, oh, there are some errors there. Oh, lots of errors. Ooh. It is a known property of an input. So we have some errors here. Let us check these errors out. First thing, this is really good that we see errors, and when we see an error and when we fix them, we understand that system in a better way, right? So let me tell you what this error is. This error says that you have not imported the forms module. So you can see here it says that I don't understand this property input, right? Property of input called as ng model. So ng model actually belongs to the forms module, right? So let us import the forms module from, so you can see like this is a good thing about Angular. They have created components. If you remember in Angular 1.x, it was just one big file. So I need it, I don't need it. I just load everything on my UI, but here it is now. I say, okay, you need only the core, you only need the platform, you only need this. So depending on your need, you know, you import the component. So with that, what happens? The system.js, the module loader only loads what is necessary, and that really brings down the footprint of the browser, right? So, but at this moment, yes, we do need from the Angular, we need the forms module, right? So we do need this. So that means over here, is it forms? What the hell? It's forms, isn't it? Yeah, that should compile. So basically we need to go and import the forms module. There it is. Okay, so forms module. So you can see here I have imported the forms module from the angular.forms, and I'm also using it in my module. So I've defined here as well, right? So let us build this, and let us see now if we are able to see our first Angular output, right? Okay, I understand, you know, that everyone is just waiting. You know, I know it's almost like 40-50 minutes, you know, we are going through these demos. I'm not adding the prerequisite time to this, the prerequisite videos, you know, so I do understand, but believe me that it is worth all the hard work. I'm sure of that. So let us go and reload this. I've imported the form module. So there you can see, because of system.js, look at the beauty of how it is loading on demand. The this is the magic of system.js, the module loader. It, when you need it, you load it, right? So there it is, my UI. So when I type here, you can see now our binding is happening, and as I type here, you know, it is binding to my UI. Great, isn't it? So let us quickly walk through what we have learned, and let us quickly walk through this whole solution, how it is working, what things are loading. So let me give you a brief flow of how the complete Angular 2.0 project is organized and how things are loading here. So here is the flow. So first thing, your master page runs, right? Your master page actually goes and tells to the module loader, the system.js, saying that please go to the config file, and in the startup section, you know, whatever things are there, please start loading it, right? Now in the system.js.config, you know, we have this startup over here. So it goes to the startup and it loads all the Angular necessary modules, right? And then it goes and it says that, okay, start loading the binders, right? So in my binder folder, I have all my binders. So I have something called as the startup.js or startup.ts. So in the startup.ts, he goes and he says, oh, we need to go and load the customer module library. So he goes and he loads the customer module library, and the customer module library goes and loads the customer component, right? And the customer component goes and loads my my model, my business logic, and binds this business logic, or binds these components, you know, to the customer.html and sticks it to this customer-ui, which is on the master page over here, right? So let me go and quickly run this in a debug mode. Must be, when you see things in a debug mode, it becomes more clear. So let me just do a Control F5 and let me try to load all this in a debug mode, whatever debug mode I can show you, you know. So let me do that. So I'll do a F12. I will use the Chrome debugger tools. Okay, I'll go to sources. So there it is. So now look at this. So first thing is, in the master page, he first goes and imports or loads the startup. From here he goes into the binder, and in the binder he then goes to the startup.ts file. So it actually goes over here. From here he loads the module library, right, and he starts loading him. Once he is loaded, then he goes and loads the component, and the component, because of this thing, gets loaded into the UI. So let us see. I'm going to go and reload. I put breakpoints all over. So there it is. First he goes to the startup, right, and in the system.config we have defined this startup configuration. From there he loads. First he goes and he loads the startup.ts. The startup.ts first loads the module library. You can see the module library loads the components, right? The component goes and loads the individual classes, the models, and then these models are stuck to this UI using the template URL and selector, right? So there it is. So, and then you have those lovely bindings over there, right? So that was the end of this first video. So in this first video we were trying to run the Angular 2.0 first application, and while we did this, we tried to understand a lot of concepts. So we understood what is a module, we understood what is a component, we understood what is ng model and what are expressions, and we also looked into that what exactly is the use of Angular. So great, so congratulations to do the first part of the video, and in the next coming 7 hours we will go into more details of Angular 2.0. Again I repeat, please do go and see the prerequisite videos, because the prerequisite videos are very, very essential to understand the other parts of Angular, like System.js, TypeScript, Zone.js, and so on. So my request again that please go and see those videos, and see you in the second video of Angular. Thank you very much.